Well, despite the roughly 10 trillion US dollars he's wiped off of the global markets, President Donald Trump is standing by his tariffs today.
It's the only chance our country will have to reset the table, because no other president would be willing to do what I'm doing or to even go through it. Now, I don't mind going through it because I see a beautiful picture at the end.
Well, this was a roller coaster day for the markets as indexes bounced between gains and losses. At close, the Dow Jones was down almost another full percent, while the NASDAQ ticked up 0.1%. So how are analysts at the big U.S. agencies making sense of all this economic chaos? Mark Zandi is the chief economist with Moody's Analytics, and he joins me now. Mark Zandi, welcome to the show. It's good to meet you, sir.
It's so good to meet you. Thanks for having me on.
If these tariffs stay in place and all of the counter tariffs stay in place, what happens to the U.S. economy? What happens to the world economy?
David, brace for impact. That's a pretty dark scenario. I think we go into recession here in the U.S. and globally. I don't know how we would avoid it. I mean, here in the U.S., the tariffs represent a massive tax increase on U.S. consumers and businesses. If you do the arithmetic, it's the largest tax increase since the Vietnam War, when that tax increase was used to finance the war. It hurts consumers. It hurts businesses. Many businesses purchase imported goods to produce whatever it is that they're producing, so it hurts their profitability. Of course, it's nailed the stock market. The stock market kind of did okay today, but it's down, what, 17, 18, 19% from its peak 6 weeks ago. That's a lot of wealth that's been wiped out. And in the U.S., consumer spending is very top heavy. Just give you a statistic. The folks in the top 10% of the income distribution account for nearly half the spending. And of course, it's those well-to-do that own the stock. So stock market down, they get hit. So, it doesn't take a lot of thought to get to the place where this is a pretty dark scenario, both for the U.S. and by extension, Canada and the rest of the world.
How quickly do you think that recession comes? Because, we heard comments from Larry Fink, the CEO of BlackRock, I think it was today, when he said that, most CEOs he talked to would say the U.S. is already in a recession. What's your sense of when it hits sort of the technical definition here?
Yeah, I'm an economist, so I stick to the numbers. And the key statistic here is jobs, employment. Once you go from positive employment to negative, losing jobs, that's the demarcation between recession and no recession. We're not there yet. We got the March employment data last week, looked okay. Of course, that's in the rearview mirror. But if you look forward, I do think we will see job growth slow. And, if I had to pick a month, given all the things that are kind of unfolding here, and the president doesn't find an off-ramp, for these tariffs, I suspect by June, July, in that period, we'll see some negative job numbers. And when the academics sit down and date this recession, it'll be, June or July 2025.
Okay, so China's retaliated, Canada's retaliated, Europe has put retaliatory measures on the table. China's retaliated at 34% tariffs. Trump threatened today to go up by an additional 50% on China, going well over 104% if he does it. I mean, what does that do to your outlook here? I mean, if it goes to those levels, it feels like all bets are off.
Yeah, that's part of why recession risks are as high as they are. Even if the president kind of finds a way to backtrack on some of the tariff increases on other countries, the fact that the U.S. is going at it with the Chinese, the two largest economies on the planet by orders of magnitude, is really not a good place to be. And it doesn't feel like anyone's going to back down here. It feels like a global game of chicken. And I don't know how that plays out. It just doesn't feel good. And if both countries keep raising their tariffs tit for tat, we're going to end up with very little trade between the two countries, and the fallout from that is just going to be very difficult to overcome. So, that actually, David, the fact that the Chinese have retaliated in kind, and now that the president is upping the ante, is maybe the thing that made me most worried today. The piece of information that I feel most uncomfortable with coming out of today's action.
So despite what history tells us about the effect tariffs have on economies, despite what the markets are saying, despite what other countries are saying, despite what the economists are saying, the president and his cabinet are talking about an upside. The Treasury Secretary saying you can build long-term economic fundamentals for prosperity by bringing back manufacturing, and that a bunch of countries have reached out trying to renegotiate trade barriers. I mean, do you see this upside in the plan that the White House is claiming?
I don't. I'm perplexed by it. I mean, I'm just an example. Put yourself in the shoes of a CEO of a major, say, global vehicle manufacturing company. You're trying to decide what to do with these tariffs. Should you invest in the United States? And then you ask yourself, what are the tariffs going to be tomorrow? What are they going to be a month from now? What are they going to be 3 years from now when if I build a plant, it's going to be finished? It takes 3-4 years to build a vehicle plant. And what about 10, 20 years from now? Because these plants have that long a life. The answer is, I have no idea. I don't really know. These tariffs are done under executive order. They can be changed with the stroke of a pen, And are they legal? Who knows that? I mean, they're going to be challenged and already being challenged in the courts. That's going to take a long time to figure out, but it'll ultimately be adjudicated maybe a year, 18 months, 24 months from now, and they might go all completely away. So would you actually make a big investment in the United States, given the uncertainty around these tariffs? I just don't get it. I don't see it. And by the way, David, think about it for another 3 seconds. Suppose you do get some investment here. If you go look at U.S. manufacturing, it's 10% of the job base. In a good year, it creates 10, 20, 30,000 jobs. Maybe in a fantastic year, it'd be 100,000 jobs, but that's nothing, in the context of the American economy. It needs to create 1 million, 1.5 million every single year. So I'm perplexed by it. I'm confused by the whole thing.
I mean, would America even have the labor pool to work in factories of the magnitude and scale that they're talking about? And with the goods they produce, having to pay an American wage, I mean, would they even be affordable for the Americans, even inside a tariff wall? If you look what it does to garments, if you look what it would do to an iPhone, it seems like you're turning reasonably affordable goods into massively expensive luxury items if you get what you want out of this plan.
Well, here's the irony in all that. You would need more immigration, right? I mean, because the domestic population is, like in much of the rest of the world, declining. Everyone's like me. I'm a baby boomer. Approaching retirement very quickly. Not that I'm going to retire, David, but I'm just.
Well, not now. Not with the markets the way they are.
Exactly. I got a lot of work to do.
Yeah.
But the demographics here are pretty obvious, pretty compelling. So if you want, to bring a lot of workers back here, a lot of jobs back here, you need a lot of workers. You need more immigration. But of all the things to be concerned about at this point, I think that's at the bottom of the list. At the top of the list is. What's the problem we're addressing here? What is it that we're trying to fix? And bringing manufacturing back here certainly can't be, the objective here, because, that's not going to happen. And even if it did, it's not going to create a lot of jobs.
If I can ask you just about the markets, right? Like they were down really pretty badly since inauguration, down quite poorly since Liberation Day, as the president calls it. Very mixed today. Last week I spoke to a Republican congressman named Chuck Edwards from North Carolina. This was after trillions have been lost on the market. He said investors were being emotional, Canada was being emotional, companies were being emotional. We saw the NASDAQ up a little bit today. I mean, are people being emotional? I mean, have the markets just recalibrated to this new reality, or what conclusion can we draw from what we saw today?
Well, there's a reality here. We're in the middle of a global trade war. That's as I said, that's a massive tax increase. That's real dollars and cents that people are going to pay. Here's a statistic. If all those tariffs that have been announced are actually implemented, the typical American household will have to spend $2,100 more a year to buy the same goods as they are today. And lower middle income households, that can't save anything, they don't have any kind of cash cushion or savings, that's a lot of money. They got it. I got to make some hard choices there. What do I do with that? What bill am I not going to pay? What credit card am I going to use? And so, very significant effects here, real consequential effects. And let's not discount emotion. Emotion matters. At the end of the day, a recession is a loss of faith. Consumers lose faith that they're going to be able to hold on to their job. Businesses lose faith that they're going to be able to sell whatever they produce. It's a psychological event. And, we're right on the precipice here of pushing that collective psyche over the cliff. And once consumers start to pull back and businesses follow, we're done. We're in the rabbit hole. We're going into recession. Okay,
so just as a final point, Mark Zandi, with everyone's collective psyche on the edge of that cliff, I mean, what are you watching for tomorrow and the next couple of days to get a sense of where this is going? Because we've seen, Israel dropped all the tariffs. Trump kind of shrugged and didn't, respond in kind. I mean, what are you watching for in terms of the markets and the administration in terms of where this is going to go?
We need an off-ramp. the president, the administration has to figure out how to de-escalate this, bring those tariffs back in, and not engage in kind of tit for tat, conflict with other trading partners. That's just not going to work. So hopefully he finds that the administration finds that off ramp here pretty soon. But I'll say, David, it has to happen pretty soon, because if it does in the next week, 2 or 3, I'm afraid we're off the cliff, and we're in that self-reinforcing negative cycle called a recession, and there's no going back.
It feels like they're in a cul-de-sac right now. They're in. It sure does, right? It's closed off, and they're not changing direction at all.
Yep.
Well, Mark Zandi, thank you. We appreciate the analysis, and let's hope we avoid that cliff. Thanks for being here today, sir.
Yeah, anytime. Take care now.